Welcome to The Pivot Point, stories of courage, resilience, and reinvention. I'm your host, Jessica McGann, coach, producer, and creative, whose mission is to normalize the human experience, ignite the soul, and move you from feeling limited to limitless. Stories connect us, and my hope is that within this series, you will find at least one story that resonates with you on a deeply personal level, one that speaks to your soul or your current situation that will motivate you to keep moving forward, inspire you to make bold, brave choices in your own life, and help you feel less alone in the process. Today's episode is a bit longer than normal, but for good reason. In this episode, my guest, Will Wheeler, takes us through his childhood as he struggles to navigate an educational system with dyslexia and undiagnosed ADHD. There was still so much unknown about neurodiversity at the time, and ultimately, Will ended up failing school. Will thought he was destined for a life of nothing and used drugs and alcohol to cover up and cope with his depression and anxiety for the best part of 15 years, until the combination of pivotal moments led him to his purpose. This story is one about rewriting old narratives, self-discovery, stigma, addiction, and how one man, Will, is now able to use his experience and healing to help change the education system for current and future neurodiverse people. Will Wheeler is a proud neurodistinct person with dyslexia and ADHD who has worked with people and organizations all over the world. Will is the founder of Neurodiversity Academy and the host of the Open Hearted podcast. Will works closely with other community leaders to help promote and encourage organizations to develop neuro-inclusive working environments. This includes areas like recruitment, career progression, leadership training, and education. Will's goal is to talk more openly about his experience in life and help others to feel more comfortable opening up about theirs, which is exactly what I hope to achieve with this podcast. So, if you are neurodiverse or love someone who is, this episode is for you. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Will, I am so excited to have you on this episode of The Pivot Point. When I read your application, I connected so deeply to it. As a neurodivergent person myself with learning difficulties, navigating the educational system was a fucking nightmare for me. And I think we both relate in some of the things that happened after your pivotal moment, but I don't want to give it away, but welcome to the show.
Yeah, look, thanks so much for having me. And I think it's so amazing when you do meet people similar to you and myself, who are both neurodivergent, how many things we do have in common. And it's almost like, yeah, we live on the other side of the world to each other, but we can relate to so many things. But no, look, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I don't think I've ever met someone who I felt like could understand what it was like for me in school, or what I felt like to be treated differently because my brain learned differently. So I am really excited to hear more about your journey. And you're joining us from Australia. So where in Australia are you?
So, well, it's funny because so for anyone who knows anything about Australia, I come from a place called Brisbane, which is sort of in a state called Queensland, but I actually live in Sydney. So I moved to Sydney about 7 years ago, just for business and all of that type of stuff. So I'm originally from Brisbane, but I live in Sydney.
Sydney is definitely like the business place. I lived in Melbourne for about 10 months.
Oh, did you really? What part of Melbourne?
I kind of moved around. I think I was in Richmond for a little bit.
Oh,
and then,
Richmond, eh? Yeah, very, very. I think it's quite a classy area, Richmond.
Honestly, I also lived somewhere else, and it's been so long ago, I can't remember the name, but I lived with a beautiful family. I just loved Melbourne. It's so artistic. Everyone was so nice. I honestly kind of regret ever leaving Australia. I think that country really knows what they're doing, honestly.
Yeah, look, it's for us, it's home. And I suppose I really didn't. And I'm not trying to like sound like, hey, look, I come from the best country in the world. But until you start traveling and doing all that, you really do start to go, oh my God, this isn't so bad, you know?
Massively, 100%. I felt the same way as a traveler coming back to Toronto. I was like, you know what? I know a lot of people are going to disagree when I say this, but like, I love Toronto. I do, except for the
Yeah.
prices. But anyways, I feel like you have a lot to share. So let's just dive on in. And maybe you could just start us off by painting us a little bit of a picture of what growing up was like for you and kind of how you existed in this world before your pivotal moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, like we were speaking about prior to coming onto the podcast here, I think that, and especially, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is that I think for me, especially as a young kid, not this is, and I'm talking about before going to school, you know, I was so creative and, you know, it was great, you know, I'd be playing dress ups or, you know, I'd be, you know, playing football or even like having tea parties with the girls and all of that type of stuff. I was very creative and I really, you know, it was fantastic. And I think the hardest thing was, you know, starting school. And, you know, I didn't really know too much about school at the time. I remember my mother was very excited about me starting school and, you know, getting a pitch. I don't know. In Canada, do you guys wear uniforms to school?
It depends. If you go to a Catholic, like a religious school, you'll wear a uniform. But
Okay.
if you don't go to a Catholic school, you can wear whatever you want.
Oh, okay. So in Australia, all schools wear uniforms. So
Okay.
it's like, yeah, so it's a big thing to sort of like get a picture of your kids in their uniform on their first day of school type of thing. So I
Okay.
did all of that, got to school, all of that. And then, to tell you the truth, I remember it like it was yesterday. I was so nervous. I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea what was going on. Got into school and then, you know, my mum left me and all that. I'm thinking, okay, you know, this is probably just like you know, just playing and all that. And, you know, after the months went on type of thing, I really started to realize that, hang on, I'm not like everyone else. For starters, I write with my left hand. Everyone else was writing with their right hand. So that was a big thing. I didn't even realize it at the time because it was
Mhm.
just normal to me. I remember it took me forever to be able to learn how to spell my name properly. I remember my teacher giving some tracing thing to my mother, and I just constantly trace my name, copy it for hours just until I got my name right. And I remember, you know, things happening where I just didn't get it. And back in those days, we're talking about the 80s now, probably, yeah, late 80s. And, you know, I wasn't getting it. Then my teachers would just be breathing down my neck. And I remember building up like tears, all of this type of stuff as a little kid, because you're thinking, what? I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm getting in trouble. And I
Oh,
think that was a big point of where you start to go, hang on, what's wrong here? You start, and I never realized it at the time, but I think I was really struggling with anxiety at that point as a young kid because you don't know what anxiety is at that time, and then you just, I don't know, because you're afraid you're going to get in trouble every day. I was afraid to go home and tell mom and dad that I got in trouble because I was going to
you're
get in
so
trouble from
young.
them.
You're like,
Yeah,
you're a
yeah.
baby.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so, you know, and I think as I sort of progressed in, so we have what they call primary school here. I don't know what you call it over in
I
Canada.
think that's what we call it here, like
Ah,
JK,
okay,
something like
yeah,
that. Junior
yeah.
kindergarten.
Yeah. So, you know, as I progressed through, the same thing would continually keep happening in school. So, you know, I got to a point where when you've constantly got teachers breathing down your throat, or breathing down your neck, sorry, you start to get sick of it. So I started to become that rebellious kid. I would tell the teachers, fuck off, or, yeah, I'd do all of that type of stuff
What?
because, well, the thing is, you got to remember, like, I suppose you're a breaking point. You know,
Yeah.
you don't have your parents to rely on because your parents well, it wasn't that my parents were bad or anything. It was more my parents were feeding off what my teachers were telling them, and they were telling them I was a bad kid, I wasn't putting any effort into class, all of that type of stuff.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that there was much information or education around
Yeah,
ADD,
no.
ADHD, autism, like
Yeah,
any
no.
of that stuff at that
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Well, this was the thing. So in grade 4, I got diagnosed with dyslexia. And it's like, okay. And it was really strange because when I got diagnosed with dyslexia, sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? It was identified that I have an extremely high IQ. And so
Oh,
what they class that as is now they never classed it as anything back in the day. So I'm what they class as twice exceptional or 2E. So what I'm very extremely intelligent, but then I'm on the other end of the scale where I struggle with certain things and stuff like that. So this is where being neurodivergent, it doesn't actually affect IQ. Do you know what I mean? So if we look at, hey, you're autistic or you're this, and write that person off as a dummy, that's the wrong way to go about things, because this could be an extremely intelligent person here and we're just writing them off type of thing. And I think you and I sort of had this conversation briefly before where we were speaking about, you said you felt like an
I
idiot
was
in
treated like I was
school.
stupid. I had teachers, literally, I had a science teacher when I went into high school, and I had been diagnosed already with ADD and learning difficulties. So I can't remember the extent of them, but the one that I really remember that I struggle with the most is I have trouble processing information. It takes me about double the time, sometimes triple the time as a normal person to process and understand questions or answers. Sometimes I have to read things. Anyways, and so this was on my school record. And when I went into, I really wanted to go to university, like so bad. I wanted that option, but my learning disability sheet said I should take all college classes because academic classes would be too hard. But I was like, fuck that. You're not telling, I'm going to university and I will work hard. And when I went into that academic science class, the first day of class, the teacher came up to me and was like, you need to switch classes. You're like, basically, I don't remember the words, but I remember hearing, you're too stupid to be in this class. And like having like your teachers should be supportive and encouraging. You're there to learn. Why are any teachers telling any child what they can and cannot do, what they're capable of? Like, no, I just don't agree with it.
Well, it's funny you say that because, and this isn't all teachers, but
No,
I
of course
believe,
not.
yeah, because I had some all right teachers sometimes, and I did really well with them,
Too. Yeah.
and I really take my hat off to those people. And it really goes to show that, if you have a good teacher, it's not necessarily the person, it's a lot of the time it's a teacher. And the thing that I found in school was that the biggest bullies in school actually weren't like other kids. So some of them were. It was actually some of the teachers. Do you know what I mean? Because and here's an example right here, right? So if you're in class and I go, and this would quite happen a lot. Oh, Jessica, you can't. You're an idiot. You'll never get anywhere in life. Blah blah. In front of all these kids, right? When you get into the playground, those kids are then going to go, "Oh, you're just an idiot. That's because Miss Such and Such said you were." Do you know what I mean? And that passes it on, type of thing. And this is actually a big thing that, what I sort of faced was, like I said, I got diagnosed in grade 4. And look, I didn't even know. So I'm ADHD as well. I didn't even know I was ADHD until like last year.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And it only got discovered because a good friend of mine, she is like a doctor in neurodiversity. She was reading my book and she's like, "Hey, Will, reading your book, it sounds like you're ADHD. Come into my office. Let's get you tested." And yeah, it came back 100% that I'm like very high on the hyperactivity side of ADHD and all of this type of stuff. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy. But this is the thing, right? So in school, you know, as a young kid, you're getting the teachers breathing down your neck. You've got them telling your parents that you're not going to do, you're struggling, you're a disruption in class. The kids in class then hear that you're not that smart, so they treat you like you're an idiot. And then you're sort of told, if you don't do well in school, you're never going to be able to do good in life. And that was one of the killers for me, and I think for me, my my self-esteem was just very low. I was very rebellious, and I just got to a point where I was just like, man, I don't care about school. If I have to,
Okay.
and leaving school, and I'm sort of jumping ahead of a few things now. It really, you just have no ambitions for such a long time. But to
Well,
sort of, yeah.
well, even like to be receiving those kinds of messages, and like when you got to go to school every day, like you're forced back into this environment that you don't feel safe in, or at least I'll speak for myself. I did not feel safe at school. I felt bullied. I felt put down. I didn't feel smart enough to be there, like, because that's what the messages that I was receiving. Like I almost dropped out of school when I was in high school. Like everything just felt so hard, and it's so debilitating at that point in your life, because you don't, it's not like when you're an adult, you have way more freedoms. I can leave a workplace. I can separate myself. I know more about my mindset now. I can take care of myself. But as a kid, you are really susceptible to what people are saying to you at that time. You believe them because you don't know who you are at that time.
Yeah, well, they're supposed to be the people you look up to.
Yeah.
So, when you're being fed that, not by just one teacher, but from all teachers, it's you believe it. And if you're not doing well, you start to go, okay, well, because for people who don't know what it's like to be dyslexic or have a learning disability or whatever, you can try, like, say, and this is the thing, what I've sort of identified is that I'm a brilliant learner. I just learn differently to how other people learn, if that makes sense, right?
100%.
Yeah. So the thing is, if I'm trying to learn something like everyone else is, I'll struggle with that big time. Right. And a lot of the time, that's how everything is done. That's what you're getting based. That's what you're getting graded on. Right. So it becomes, you just become, you have no confidence. You think you can't really do anything. And you've really got no hope, because you think, okay, well, every time I tried, and this is what I was getting at, sorry, even I used to find, even when I would try, I'd go and study for days, and then I'd come back and still get a shit mark, as shit a mark as if I didn't study. And it's like, what the hell's wrong with me?
Yeah. And then you see those other people in class who don't have to study and they just ace the test. It's just like, it's so easy for them. And you're like, oh, what is wrong with me? That's really the message. At least I kept saying to me, it's like, what's wrong with me? And that's a horrible message to be telling yourself at such an impressionable age.
Yeah, totally. And this is the thing. I think for me, growing up very young there, I was very confused. I was very confused about who I was. I grew up in a neighborhood where there was just, I don't know. I grew up in a nice sort of neighborhood, but there was just weird people. And when I look at it now, there was just like some weird people around, type of thing. So I haven't really spoken about this much, but when I was around that primary school age, I got sexually abused by like some not younger guys, some older guys in my neighborhood. That would just be weird, you know what I mean? But that was the thing. I had that going on. I had being bullied by the teachers and failing school going on. And it was just a recipe for disaster as I got older. Because once I got into high school, now here in Australia, we just go into high school. We don't have like junior high. So, getting into high school, right? my parents sent me to a private school. So it was like, there's very high expectations in private
Yeah.
schools because technically they're a business, right? They want to show that people who come to those schools are getting good marks because it's bad on them if they get bad marks.
Of
So me
course.
struggling, that school is just annihilating me. And once again,
Oh,
I started becoming really more rebellious, sorry. And, that just kept on going on. Hey, if you don't do well in school, you're never going to get anywhere. And I got to a point where I'm like, you know what? I've had enough of this. And this is the thing. By the end of high school, you are just stuffed. You're just, what's the word I'm looking for? Like fatigued
yeah.
from getting all of this, and it just wasn't easy at all. So, I started hanging around with the wrong crowd. I got into, I was 18 before I finished school. We can drink when you're 18 here in Australia. I don't know if it's the same in Canada.
19 for us.
Oh, 19. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So I was still in high school when I was legally able to drink. So I'd go night clubbing during school days, and then I started, getting introduced to different types of drugs. And I remember like starting off with weed. And, I remember when I first started smoking weed and everything. And look, don't get me wrong. I think weed, now when I look at weed, it can have some very good benefits when used correctly.
Hmm?
But like, because I'm pretty sure it's legal over in Canada,
Yeah,
right?
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I would like to see it legal here, but
Mhm.
when used correctly, there can be some very good positives to it.
Oh,
But
yeah,
I
absolutely.
wasn't using it in a positive way, you know
You were
what I
using it to
mean?
escape, I'm sure.
And I remember like smoking up straight after school or sometimes before school, all of that type of stuff. And just thinking, whoa, this gets me away from everything that's bothering me. It was like a
Oh,
wave just came through my body and I
yeah.
didn't have to feel that pain anymore, right?
I'm so
But
glad that I didn't have access to weed when I was in high school because
mm,
I would have 100,000% done the exact same thing.
mm,
I
mm,
wanted to
mm,
escape so bad. I was sneaking alcohol into school. I
mm,
was
mm.
hanging out with the wrong crowd. I was just so unhappy. I
Yeah,
would love marijuana.
yeah. And this was the thing. And I think what happens is when you are so unhappy and you have this escape, you need more, right?
Mhm.
You need more. You need to be away from that more. But the problem is what I started to find, especially when you're using drugs, and because what I found was I started using that, but then I started hanging around with different people who would then introduce me to different, more harder type of drugs. And then that was my lifestyle. I was hanging around people that it was always about, like I was working, but we'll be using a whole bunch of stuff on the weekends. And this is the thing. People don't realize that they're addicted if like their whole week. Some people think, oh man, I've got a full-time job. I'm not addicted to drugs. But if you're having to use Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning and then go to work again and then you're waiting to get over and then do all that again because you can't wait to do it again, you're addicted, my man. You know what I mean?
But yes,
um
absolutely.
it's a problem,
Were you
right?
addicted? Were you addicted at
Oh
that time?
yeah,
Oh yeah.
totally. I would constantly be smoking weed all the time. The weekends consisted of Friday night. Well, we'd start drinking on Thursdays. We had something called like Beer Thursday. I don't know why we had Beer Thursday because we'd still go to work on Friday, be hungover as, feeling like shit, get back. And this was the thing, it was just about hanging out with people who would it would be all that type of shit. We'd just be talking about drugs. What drugs can we get on? This was great, and I don't know, it was just frustrating. But like I said, what we were getting to was, you start hanging around certain types of people, and that's your life. Those are those types of people, right? The funniest thing was I was starting to progress slowly in my career. Some really great things started to happen once I left school.
What career did
right?
you go into right out of school?
Oh, so I failed school, so there wasn't
You
too many
failed.
options. Oh yeah, yeah, totally. I got the lowest grade of the school. So, and it was weird. I didn't tell anyone that I got that grade, but the whole school knew. And it was like so embarrassing because I don't know, it was just like people, because everyone would talk about their grades they got, and it was so
Oh,
embarrassing. People would be like, "Man, everyone said you got this." I'm like, "How do people know that?" Which is sort of cool now because I can use it to go, "Well, I found this," and there's a lot of people I did go to school with where I'm killing it over them now. So it
yeah.
sort of works
I
in
just
well.
I want to make 2 points of that too, because like
Yeah.
one, we know that you're a highly intelligent person. And
Mm-hmm.
so for you to be failing so much, so
Mm-hmm.
drastically, like it just like my heart hurts just wishing that there had been patience with these teachers to support you in the way that you needed to in order to be successful. And then the second thing is that I believe that a lot of neurodivergent people are highly creative individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for me, what really landed much later and made me feel better is like I felt especially stupid because I couldn't do the math and the science
Mm-hmm.
and the history. But my skills where I was really smart was in drama class. When it came to emotions, I was highly emotional
Mm,
intelligent. I wasn't
mm,
book smart. And I was made to feel like I would never succeed. And I was so dumb because I couldn't do those things. And
mm,
no one taught me that emotional intelligence could be just as, if not more valuable, and that my
mm.
creative side was not a waste of time, but something that could take me into a career that I love. Like that just wasn't something that was brought to our attention.
And you know what? It's funny you say that because I actually own a company called Neurodiversity Academy, which our goal is to actually connect people with colleges and universities that actually will help them to. So, say if you didn't do well in school, rather than go, dude, that's it, mate, you failed school, you've got no hope. We want to go, hang on, hang on, hang on, have you ever thought of this route? Let's take you on this route. You might have to do this, you might have to do this, but this will then allow you to get into this. So once I finished school, I failed school and I just got a job working in a warehouse, loading and unloading containers, driving a forklift. But what I found was, even in then, I became, because I'm so intelligent, I was able to do things and refine things and became very efficient. Now, in warehousing and logistics, that's what it's all about because time and efficiency means money. So I was able to progress really quick and ended up becoming like a manager of this huge warehouse by the age of 21, like
Oh
this
my
kid.
gosh.
It was hard. It was hard because I was doing the job of like a 40-something-year-old. So I had a lot of pressure on me. And it was probably too much pressure at that time. And the hardest thing was I actually still had a lot of big drug and alcohol problems. So I was still smoking weed sometimes. I was still taking ecstasy and other stuff as well and drinking a lot on the weekends and coming in, focus, boom, work, blah, 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 right?
Wow.
And I would just be able to do it. And, people would be like, man, because to tell you the truth, when I used to like hit the piss, or that's what we call alcohol in Australia, piss, right? When I would like drink alcohol, I was wild. I was like this party animal. And people are like, dude, it blows me away how like wild you are. And then you can come in and do this. You know
Mm.
what I mean? I'm like, oh, and I just think I was cool. I'd be like, yeah, I can do anything. And I think, I'd been dating a lot of girls and all that, but then I was in like a full serious relationship then,
Mm.
and it was interesting with this person that I was dating then, my ex-girlfriend, because she was a really, when I first met, a really nice person. All of this type of stuff. But, she was very big into the drugs and partying and all of that type of stuff.
So you were
So
feeding each other's fire here.
pretty much, pretty much. And it became, she would, I don't know, she didn't like, she wanted to excel. She wanted me to excel in my career, but she still wanted to party and all that type of stuff, right? And, she probably had better grades than me and all that and was able to get some better jobs than me. And a lot of the time I'd get offered all these fantastic jobs on big money. And she'd be like, I'd never get to see you. So I wouldn't take those jobs. So a lot of the time I was sort of being held back, and sort of pushing away opportunities type of thing. And, and I won't go too much into it, but as, say, a young relationship goes, it just really didn't work, all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when you break up with someone, some people can say some pretty nasty stuff. And I
Oh,
think we're
yeah.
talking about like pivotal points type of thing, she said to me, she's like, look, you're never going to change. You're always going to be this party animal and all this type of stuff. You're never going to change. You're just always going to be the same. And, taking that on, it actually reminded me a lot of high school and school, being told that, look, you're always just going to be the same. You're never going to get anywhere in your life, all that type of stuff. And it was like, boom, it was
It
like a
hit
big,
you hard.
yeah, totally. And I can tell you what, I actually, really hit the drugs and alcohol even harder at that point, because it's just like, shit, I am that. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
let's explore this a little bit, because this is your pivotal moment. This is
Mm, mm,
life has been hard, school has been
mm,
hard, you're deep into
mm,
drugs and alcohol, you're partying, you're escaping from reality, so to
mm,
speak, because of your thoughts about yourself, your self-worth, and the messages you feel you're receiving. And
mm,
this moment and you guys ending your relationship and her telling you that you're afraid of change just hits you
mm,
like a ton of bricks. And now you're
mm,
saying that, it hit you so hard that you wanted to escape even deeper into those drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, totally.
So what really landed for you? Like, what did you hear in that moment when she said those words to you?
Uh, to tell you the truth, when I think about it, it was a while back, a while ago now.
Yeah.
It was sort of like, shit, I am this. Do you know what I mean? I am this. She was starting to progress in her career. Her career was very big. Or not, like, to her, it was very big. She'd got this new job. And I think the thing was, she was getting influenced by a lot of people from her work to say, look, this guy's an idiot. He's not any good for you, all of that type of stuff. And really, it was the other way around, because I'm not trying to sound like negative or anything, but it was, because what I sort of found was that I would be doing all this stuff and people would be coming up to me and they're like, dude, it blows me away that someone your age is doing the job that you're doing. You said you've got this thing running like clockwork, and I'm talking about this warehouse I was running at the time. And they're like, you're only 21. When I was 21, I would never have been doing this type of stuff.
I was
So,
not.
yeah. And I was sort of, I started, at first I was sort of like, yeah, I'm an idiot, head down type of thing, just so depressed, all that. But then I would sort of stop and think, and I'd take that stuff in and go, hang on, I actually am pretty good at what I do. I've got
You
all.
started to self-reflect a little bit.
Yeah, I did. I actually remember like sitting, like looking at views of something and just thinking about stuff, going, because you go through depression, you're like, should I just end this? I'm sick of it. You know what I mean? All of that. And you're like,
Yeah.
hang on, these people are telling me this. I must be pretty good at what I do. And I'm like, and at that point in my job, I'd been working in that same job for 7 years. I hated it. Right. And I'm just like, you know what? I need a change. I hate my job. This is a prime time to really make a big difference. I didn't know what the hell to do, And I went, you know what, stuff this. I think this is a perfect time to travel, you know, and this was where I went, all right, I'm going to travel. I have hardly any money at the moment because I was partying all the time. So,
It's kind of like
I
oh,
was,
you don't think I can change? Watch me. I'm going to
yeah, yeah.
travel the
Well,
world.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's what it was, sort of thing. I was sort of like, you know what, I need to find myself again because when I was sort of, you know, and I sort of, I suppose, thought, you know, people do like me and that, but I wanted to learn more about who I was. So I wanted to go and travel somewhere where no one would know who I was, and then see how people would adapt to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
you know, so
So where
yeah,
did
I
you?
just,
Well,
oh,
okay, wait.
sorry. Yeah.
um, Firstly,
Mm,
what was this response from the other people around you, like your family and your friends, when you're like, I'm going to quit this job that I've
mm,
excelled in and
mm.
I'm going to go travel? What was the response you got?
Well, at first, I more spoke to my mother about it, and she was like supportive of it, but I could see that she didn't want me to leave because up until that point, I had really relied heavily on my parents, you
Oh,
know,
okay.
and this is quite common with a lot of neurodistinct people, not all.
Mhm.
But say if I, you know, at that point, I wasn't doing really good with handling money. Now I'm brilliant at it. So I would always be going to mum and dad, hey, look, I need to borrow some money, or hey, look, need to do this. Hey,
Mhm.
mum, are you able to call up the insurance company? Or hey, mum, can you help me pay this bill? Blah blah blah. I would rely way too much on them, and I knew that.
So
And
she's
this
probably like,
was
how are you going to survive out in all these countries without
pretty much,
us?
yeah, pretty much. And that was where I was like, you know, I want to go over there. And because I would often hear about how people had traveled and it changed them. And I was like, okay, maybe I need this type of thing. So that was that. And I remember telling my friend, and this was the thing, I was hanging, and I knew that the people I was, it was hard to sort of explain. Everyone I used to hang out with were really lovely people, but I could see that they were self-destructive. You know what I mean? And that became a lot more clear as after this period, because a lot of them are dead now, and
Oh, I'm so
because of
sorry.
certain things. Yeah, yeah. But at the time, it's party, 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 and you think everyone's your friend, but it's not like that at all. But yeah, so ended up packing up all my stuff, selling everything, moving overseas,
Where'd you
and
go?
yeah, so I actually just moved to the UK because Australia has like, I'm pretty sure Canada does as
We're
well,
under the
has like,
Queen's. We're under the
yeah, yeah,
Queen's. So you could get like
yeah,
a working holiday visa, no problem.
yeah, yeah,
Send it
yeah,
in.
yeah, 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 yeah. So I had that for 2 years and went over there, knew nobody. And yeah, it was wild. Like, don't get me wrong, I was still partying hardcore, but the one big thing, and this was probably another pivotal moment too,
Sure.
when I was over there, I remember I would party you know, I was a party animal because I'd partied so hardcore back home. It was sort of like I had a really long resume of
Yep.
like being able
Listen,
to
I'm a
party.
traveler myself, and the two best partiers I've met are Aussies and the Brits. So you just went
Yeah,
to a whole other party country.
we've got a big drinking culture here, but that's not
Totally.
that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. But like, so I fitted in pretty well there. But what I found was, um, I started to find that the people that I was hanging out with in Australia, pardon me, sorry, I was starting to attract those same people in a whole completely different country. Because
Mm.
my goal was to go over there, learn about a lot about myself, really gain that confidence, and then come back and then really hit my career and blow it up
Right.
type of thing, right? But I remember being over there and then getting to a point where I'm like, everyone really loved hanging out with me and thought I was cool and that, but they would I was attracting that same people were coming to me to score them drugs. People were coming to me because I would party
Mm.
with them and all of that same stuff back in Australia. And I was just like, I remember sitting there one time just watching TV in the hostel I was living in, thinking, man, I'm just hanging out with the same people. What are you going to do when you get
Mm.
home? Well, what do you want to do? And I'm thinking, I
Wow.
don't know what the hell I want to do, you
Yeah.
know?
This is another
And then
download, like an aha moment.
sort of. And then it was like, okay. And then I remember I got to a point where it was very difficult to get jobs because the recession had kicked in. This was around 2009 or 2008, 2009, might have been 2009 then. So the recession had kicked in the UK. So it was really hard to get any type of work. So I got to a point where I was like, I called up my parents. I said, look, I think I'm going to come home, maybe do a little bit of work and then come back over. And mum and dad's like, look, we've had some calls from some people while you've been away. You know, there's this company that, so we have like what they call like training companies that train staff in, say, management, leadership, all these different things. And they're like, look, they're looking for like a warehouse trainer in management and logistics. And they're like, they've seen your resume and they're really keen to talk with you. They said the job would involve like traveling all around Australia and presenting presentations to different clients and stuff like that. And I'm like, gee, I never thought of doing that in ever. So in a way, I would have to come back and get some extra education, which they would have paid for and everything. Not my parents, but this company.
Yeah.
And I would have sort of been a teacher type of thing. So I came back, got these qualifications. So I was sort of, it's hard to explain because they call, I'm not a teacher, but I'm what they call like a trainer and assessor. So I can like assess people in certain workplaces, stuff like that. So I was doing a lot of warehousing management for people who run warehouses and that. Sorry, you go.
No, no, that's okay. I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm just
Yeah.
wondering because what you just said too was that you had this aha moment sitting in this hostel, looking around, feeling like you haven't changed enough. When you got
Mm,
this phone call from your parents saying that
mm,
you have this option to move up in this company and have a traveling
mm.
job, did you view it as a possibility of this is your chance to step into the version of yourself that you wanted to see?
Yeah, definitely. Because it was big money compared to what I
Yeah.
used to be
And I
on.
feel like we all are like a traveling job. Ooh, how fancy.
Yeah. But to tell you the truth, after years of traveling, you get to a point where you're like, stuff this, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? But
100%.
at the time, it was cool. But to tell you the truth, it was cool for a little while because you do get to see the country, and that was cool. But yeah, it was like, holy crap, man, this is the next step. I remember I was like sort of seeing this girl like when I was overseas, and she lived in Melbourne actually. And it was sort of like when we came back, it was sort of like, and this probably sounds really bad, but like it was sort of like our relationship sort of just faded away because I had to take this opportunity with my career rather than be with this girl, because it was like, do I give this up or do you know? And it sort of worked out that we just weren't made for each other.
Yeah,
We were just having fun while we were traveling, that I had to take that,
yeah.
and that was where a lot of things started to change. But the problem was I was still hanging out with a lot of the people that I was hanging out with prior to
Oh,
moving overseas. So once again, my career was starting to progress. I was doing some great things, but I was still around drugs and alcohol and all this type of stuff. And it really started to hold me back. And people were like, man, I was starting to win awards. I was starting to win like big industry awards and getting up and presenting in front of like all of these high-end people.
hmm.
And people are like, man, you're a nutter. How the hell can you do all this stuff and then still go out and hit the piss and all that? And that was almost an aha moment where I was like, man, imagine if I gave away all of that stuff and just focused on my career. Wonder how much that would then explode then.
Well, that's what I was kind of curious about. I was like, when you're hearing these things, was it kind of like, I know a lot of people who have drug and alcohol addictions
Mm,
have this sense of, I am my best self when I'm drinking
mm,
or smoking because I have social anxiety or whatever
mm,
it may be. Was it
mm.
ever like a badge of honor of like, yeah, this is the best version of me. I can do this. Or is it like what I'm thinking you're getting to of like, I don't want to be that person. I want to
Yeah,
be, I feel like this might
mm,
be holding me back.
totally, totally. I was getting to a point where when you've been drinking for a long time, you need to drink more to reach that feeling, right? Of
Yes.
being drunk or being happy, right? And I was getting to a point where I would be getting blackout drunk, right? Like I go to a lot of networking events now where there's open bar tabs, all of that. Now, if I had been going to those networking events back when I had those addiction problems, it would have killed my career.
Oh, wow.
Now I can go to these things and I'm very sound-minded and all that type of stuff. But yeah, I didn't like that person. And I was getting to a point where I didn't like the people I was hanging around. Because like when you hang around people who take a lot of drugs and alcohol, they tend to invite other people in who you might not even like, but the only reason you're hanging around them is because they can score. Do you know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
like, this person is an idiot. Why am I even hanging out with this person? I just got to a point where I was like, nah, stuff this, you know? It was almost another aha moment where,
Absolutely.
where I got to this point where, especially when I wanted to start building the company that I'm building today, that I'm like, okay, I really need to, if I'm going to build something, I need to be reputable. I need to be
Hmm.
what it's sort of weird when you're building a business because you get a lot of different information as well. But like I started to go to events where there'd be big business people talking about how they became what they became. And a
Hmm.
lot of them were people just like me. They failed school, they had big drug and alcohol problems, and they're like, if you're going to do this, you cannot be around people who want to party and booze on all the time. And I remember I went back to where I was living, and hearing that it's so motivational. You're like, that's what I need. This is what's going to help me get to
Hmm.
that next level, right?
It sounds like
And
you were already getting there too in your brain. Like there was already a part of your mind that was going, ooh, I feel like this change needs to come, is what I'm hearing. Let me know if I'm wrong.
well, it's you're sort of right, because what I found was when I started to get that training job where I was flying everywhere, all that, I was really excelling. The only problem was I was still struggling with a lot of my neurodivergent traits.
Mhm.
So I was
Such
really struggling
as,
with
yeah.
so I was really struggling with organizing, so sometimes with ADHD, you can be very unorganized. I'm very
Hmm.
organized now, but back then I would really struggle. I would struggle a lot with RSD, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So
Oh.
something might happen. And so, for example, the way RSD works is that someone may say something to you and you feel rejected. So there were certain times where my bosses would say something to me like, oh, what you haven't done this. And it might have been more because of my ADHD, which I didn't even know I had at that point, was stopping me, and I was sort of finding that people who I thought were complete fucking idiots in the
Hmm.
company I was working for were getting promoted and all this. I'm like, this person's just a snake. This person's not a leader, and like they don't give a fuck. And that really started to piss me off, type of thing. I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, if I want to, why don't you build your own company where you can be everything that people aren't being to you, type of thing?
Hmm.
So that was where I really started to go, okay, well, what company am I going to build? I had no idea, right? But I started to go to these events and started to learn what I needed to be to become the person I need to be, if that makes sense.
Totally. But did you stay in your manager job for the company, the manufacturing company, while you figured this out? Or were you like, I need to change, quit, I'm going to figure it out as I go?
Well, so with the warehouse, I had left there to go overseas. And then when I got back, I was doing like workplace
Yeah.
training. So
Yeah.
that was where I really started to go, now this is where I want to build my own company. Because that I was starting to, because warehousing, for example, it can be quite rough. The way we talk, the way people talk to each other,
Yeah.
how it can be very, very rough. But once I got into corporate, completely different once again. I'm wearing like nice clothes, all of that type of stuff. So it's just a completely different environment. And then I was around people who were on big salaries and around multimillionaires and billionaires, some of them. So I was
Wow.
getting that influence of like, okay, wow, maybe it would be great to be someone like that. So that was where I sort of started going, okay, let's look into this type of thing. But I was finding that the company I was working for, that training company at that point, just weren't giving me the opportunities. And I was like, I need to go find those opportunities myself. So that was where I started going to events, started to see people who were exceeding, doing motivational talks, all that. And then I went, whoa, okay, I need to get rid of all of this to become what I want to become, if that makes sense.
So you're now going to try and become sober after years and years and years of drinking and drugs, and you're going to try and start a business at the same time.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Good
yeah,
for you.
yeah.
Total
Yeah,
life
yeah.
transformation.
Yeah, well, the thing was, I had a year, I got to a point with my training job that I just went, stuff it, I'm having a year off. So I actually did some study then. In that period, I really got away from everyone I was around. I don't think I stopped using any drugs or anything like that at that point. Um, and then I remember I stopped drinking for almost a year. And it was interesting to see my body change, how I felt, all that.
Was it hard?
But no, it actually wasn't. It wasn't. But
It's incredible.
it was hard to get to that point. It was hard to get to that point of wanting to give up, because
Mm-hmm.
with alcohol, and this is the thing, one addiction goes from another addiction to another addiction. So you've got, say you've got, you smoke a lot of weed and take drugs, for example, you may give that up and then you're like, okay, at least I've got alcohol. Now, the thing is, alcohol is incredibly difficult to give up because it's everywhere. It's easy to get. It's not like you've got to go around the
And it's
corner and
socially acceptable. It's
exactly.
allowed.
Exactly. And everyone's like, hey, let's go out. Let's go out for dinner. So you'll have some drinks there, right? And then, it's easy to just go boom, 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 right?
Mm-hmm.
So, giving it up for a year, I had to really find, because this is the thing, you're on your own a lot. So, because if you don't want to drink, everyone else is drinking, then you're on your own, right? And I was trying to get away from all that. So for me, I actually went and started doing volunteer work with homeless people on the streets on the weekends. So instead of going to a pub and drinking, I was actually going and helping homeless people and just speaking to them and all that instead of drinking. Do you know what I
That's
mean?
amazing. That's a
Yeah.
that definitely is better than cross addiction, because that's what a lot of
Yeah.
people, right? Like I know someone like tried to quit smoking, and they instead of having to smoke, they would drink a cup of orange juice, and then they got addicted to orange juice. Because
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
can get addicted to anything, but like you have to be
Yeah.
careful. But you took your change and you, instead of giving yourself something else, you gave to someone else, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Where did
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
idea even come from?
I think it was what I sort of found when you try to cut people out of your life, and this was the thing, I pretty much got to a point where I went, fuck off, I don't want anything else to do with you know what I mean? Because they weren't the type of nice people, but they just were all about themselves, and you get to a point where no one then calls you because all of your life has been in that part. So you've got no friends, right? And I can tell you right now, and I still struggle with this, I actually struggle with like loneliness, and it's when you're on your own a lot, it can become bad. That's where you can start to pick up your
Absolutely.
drinking habits, all that type of stuff.
It's an
And
escape.
yeah, exactly. And so I had no one. I'm like, how the hell do I meet new people? And I thought about volunteering, but I thought, back in my drinking days and that, I thought, only fuckheads do like volunteering and stuff like that. Was my perception of people back in those days. But then I went and started doing it. I'm like, holy shit, these people are actually cool. You know what I mean? They were cool people, and they drank alcohol, but they didn't go and like be like, you know what I mean? We were able to go out and have some dinner and maybe a little bit of wine and call it a night. You know what I mean? And yeah, and that was where I really started to go, man, I should have done this way earlier.
Wow.
So yeah, that was sort of a bit of a change to be able to, and that's the thing, like the people I hang out with now are completely, and I tell a lot of people what I used to be like. They're like, man, I just can't see it in you. And I'm like, really? Do you know what I mean? Because they see this different side of me now, and it's sort of like crazy. But yeah, that was a big change. And yes, it was definitely hard to get to that point because it's everywhere, if that makes sense.
Oh, it's everywhere. And I think a lot of people struggle, and I think a lot of people struggle with it in silence too. So hopefully
Yeah.
someone hearing your story today might be doing some reflecting on themselves and feel inspired to do a similar kind of change or pivot in their own life when it comes to addiction.
Totally.
Do you have a healthier relationship with alcohol today, or are you sober? If I
Yeah,
may ask.
totally. Yeah. Look, I do have a healthy relationship with alcohol. I can,
Congratulations.
and yeah, and it blows my mind that I can get to this point now. And I think this is what, like I said, I had a big period off from drinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I found that when I came back to drinking, not that I was wanting to get back to drinking, but when I
Yeah.
started having some alcohol again, I could never get back to the place that I used to be back when I was younger. So, for example, I would have beer after beer. I'd knock off like at least 12 beers every day. You know what I mean? If I had 12 beers now, I would probably be dead. Do you know what I mean? I feel I have
Yeah.
2 beers now, and I'm sort of like, oh, I think that's enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, it's sort of like it's like an Olympic runner. If you don't practice, right, you're
Yeah.
never gonna be
Your
that
tolerance is
Olympic.
back, but you're
Exactly.
aware, like you're good now. Like you don't need to get wasted. Like you can
Yeah.
just enjoy one or two and you're like, that's good for me. Is that
Yeah,
correct? Yeah.
totally. Yeah, like sometimes even now, like, and this is the thing too, like I go to lots of corporate business events, and I can tell you what, man, corporate are wild. Some of the tech companies that I'm going to and that, they've got like, yeah, they put on big open bar tabs, and
Yeah.
everyone's
Let's
like,
go.
do you want a cocktail, man? And there's been some times where I've been there and like I'm like thinking, man, I'm pretty drunk, and people like are getting carried out of these places and or being inappropriate and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, man, I'm pretty clear-headed here.
Mhm.
But you know what? I've started actually going to some events, having maybe 2 wines, and then just having some non-alcoholic beer, and it's
Mhm.
almost that like that placebo effect because I'm holding something and it tastes like
Yes.
beer. I still feel like I'm in the zone and I'm drinking with everyone, if that makes sense. And then
Totally.
I
I
wake up
will
the next day feeling fine.
sometimes I'll literally just have a soda water and like a lime wedge in like a short glass because I feel more comfortable. Like I just need to be holding something. Like there's something about
Totally.
the holding a drink at a social gathering.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
Well, I'm really hearing multiple pivot points in your story. Like I hear your girlfriend telling you that you need to make a change.
Mm.
I'm hearing it's hard to tell here, like the moving home back home and the new job, or I should say sobriety is maybe
Mm.
another big change for you is
Mm.
doing that. But one thing I would love to hear a little bit more of too is like I feel like perhaps your diagnosis when you
Mm.
actually got diagnosed with ADHD
Mm.
was probably another really big pivotal moment in your life. Like when you got
Sort,
that.
yeah, sort of. And it's I'll tell you, it probably help if I describe the work I do now,
Yeah, let's
because
talk about that because
yeah,
that
yeah, okay, cool. Because that would sort of like clarify why I got diagnosed. Because if I wasn't doing the work I'm doing now, it would be like it wouldn't have happened, I don't think.
yeah.
So this was the thing. So I remember I've been talking about starting a business, right? And I
Yes.
remember when I first sort of was like, what the hell am I going to do? I had no idea what type of business I wanted to do. And I remember people going, man, you need a niche. I'm like, what the fuck is a niche? Do you know what I mean? And I'm
Uh
like, yeah, I'm like, I'm going to do it on leadership. And they're like, yeah, but what's the niche? I'm like, leadership. And I didn't realize that, like, that could be like leadership, women in leadership is that niche. Do you know what I mean? Stuff like
Oh,
that.
I remember like when I started my coaching business, I was like, I'm a life coach. And people were like, great, what's your niche? And I'm like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
coach people.
Yeah.
It's actually so much harder than people think it is.
Yeah, totally. And I think this is the beauty of, especially when you start to get into that, you start to learn a hell of a lot more, and because you have to. You
Yep.
definitely have to. So, once I sort of, so I was sort of like, okay, a niche. I want to do something in leadership. And I was dyslexic at that time. And I remember being in jobs thinking, man, I wish I could have like a business coach or a leadership coach who was dyslexic like me, who could help me, because a lot of the other business coaches and that just don't get me, or they're not open to my views because I'm so open-minded. And it's like, I don't want to be restricted to this. I want to just be able to do whatever, right? So I sort of started going, okay, I'm going to build a leadership company for dyslexic people, right? But what I sort of found was that there's just no money in it. A lot of
Demand.
people, well, wasn't it, people wanted to do it, but a lot of these people, I wanted to help for them to progress in their career or get the career that they wanted, but they didn't have a career at that point and they couldn't afford my services, if that
Mm,
makes sense. And then a lot
yes.
of the top people who are already leaders in their company, they're sort of already doing all right. So it really didn't work. That really didn't work. But what I was finding was I was starting to go and talk at a lot of events. I was really building my personal brand. People were starting to see me as this dyslexic entrepreneur guy who would talk about dyslexia and what we need to do in the workplace. But what I found was that I started to pivot from dyslexia more into neurodiversity, because with a lot of neurodiversity or neurodivergent people, a lot of people it's very rare for someone to be just one thing. So say, for example, you're just dyslexic. A lot of the time you're dyslexic ADHD, or you're autistic and ADHD, or you're Tourette's and bipolar, or whatever like that, right?
Yeah.
So I started to get more involved in the neurodiversity space, because neurodiversity is more recognized, especially in corporate,
Mm-hmm.
around DE and I initiatives. It's really still not even that recognized, but it's starting to get there. So when I
And the
first
conversation is starting to ramp up. You see a lot of, I'm really big
totally.
onto TikTok. I love the TikTok. And like there's
Mm,
so many people coming out and talking
mm,
about their ADHD, ADD, their neurodiversity, and it's
Mm-hmm.
becoming more mainstream, people getting diagnosed later in life and learning this. So having someone to go to, especially if you're an adult or you're a parent of a child with ADD, having somewhere to go for
Yeah.
help would be
Yeah.
massively beneficial.
Well, this was the thing. So we're going back at least 8 or 9 years ago. I'd be going into, say, these big corporate diversity events, right? And probably back then, the big ones were like, what is it? Gender was one of the big ones.
Right.
I'm pretty sure cultural diversity, and there was another one. I can't remember. I can't remember what it was. But there was a big three, right? And I remember going into these events nervous as, because I'm thinking, okay, what's going on? And I'd go and I'd be like, and I would be talking to some of the big banks, and they're like, yeah, we've got this, 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 this. And I'm like, I tell you what, the next biggest thing is going to be neurodiversity. And people would like look at me like just weird and like blow me off type of thing. And it was so intimidating. But I kept on going and saying, look, I do stuff around neurodiversity. And man, the door just keeps getting smacked. My RSD was at an all-time high because you just get door after door slammed in your face. Now, because neurodiversity is becoming such a big talked about thing, people want to learn about it now. Because I was that one at that time when no one was speaking about it, all of these people are now coming back to me going, hey, Will, amazing. I remember meeting you this time. You're this guy. And I'm like, yeah. Do you know what I mean?
That's amazing.
Yeah. So this was where I started to get, I'm really well known in the neurodiversity space, right? And like I said, I'm connected with like world leading doctors and everything and this is what blows me away. I was like, this guy had big drug problems and stuff like that. Now I'm rubbing shoulders with like top leading doctors and psychologists in this field. I'm not even that, but I'm up there with those people. It's almost like imposter syndrome because it's like, man, I don't even feel like I should be here type of thing.
But hey, that's what they tell us entrepreneurs all the time. It's like, get into spaces with people who are further ahead than you and learn from them. Shut the fuck up, sit there and listen to what they have to say and learn.
Totally. And and this was where, I was starting to be around people and people like, oh yeah, I'm ADHD. I'm like, oh, I'm just dyslexic. And then I was learning more about, hey, look, a lot of people, they usually say they've got a buddy. So you're either dyslexic ADHD or ADHD or whatever. And and like I said, my friend, she came to me and she's a leading doctor in this. And she's like, look, hey, Will, I just read your book. Yeah, it definitely sounds like you're ADHD. Let's come in and get you tested. She did it for free for me because, this costs like
thank you, friend.
$5,000.
That's really nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Your networks are everything. Your networks definitely pay off. And she's like, yeah, you're ADHD. And I'm just like, oh my God, that makes so much more sense now because a lot of the things I go through, I haven't even really spoken about this, but talking about addiction, I actually struggle with sex addiction as well. So with a lot of ADHDers, we can sometimes be hypersexual because we've got that hyper type of thing. We're trying to search for that dopamine hit. Or it can be the opposite where you're hyposexual, where, you don't want that at all or not much at all. So that made sense as well. It's like, because I had been talking to her about that. Things are clicking into place. Totally. Because I had been talking to her about that stuff. And she goes, yeah, this is because of this. This is because of that, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh my God, now it makes sense. You know what I mean? So it did make a lot of sense, but it doesn't change. I still do struggle with some things, but I'm able to be more vocal about it and go, hang on, I struggle with this. Are we able to do it this way? Like with my business partners, we they'll say, look, we need to do this. And I'm like, look, are we able to look at it differently? Because and they're really good. You know what I mean? So it definitely does help, if that makes sense.
It sounds like it was you were able, like with that diagnosis, to see so much of your behaviors and understand more as like why you showed up in the world the way you did, or why you make certain decisions. And that can be immensely transformative for anybody. Like even if it's a medical diagnosis, like if you struggle with a pain and then you finally get the diagnosis, it doesn't necessarily take the pain away, but it just adds context to so much of the things that have happened in your past. And that is healing in and of itself. So we've gone through so many pivots in your life. Like you have changed and transformed and made really big, brave choices for yourself. I want to explore, I definitely want to know how traveling changed you, how you think that trip, like if you were to if you could just give me a couple sentences of like how that travel, that first pivot point really changed things for you, what would you say?
Well, I had to stand on my own 2 feet. If I'm going to put it into a simple thing, I had to learn fast how to stand on my own 2 feet. Where back when I was in Australia, I relied too heavily on my parents. Now going into my own business, I can't run to my parents. You know, that would just be stupid. Now I'm able to go, hang on, I've got to do this. To get to this, I need to do this. I need to have this organized. So I need to have this in place. All of that type of stuff. So it really woke me up to, there was actually a few things that it woke me up to. One, when I was over in the UK, I really learned that over in the UK, they've got minimum wage, and minimum wage is like really minimum. I think it was like £6, and it's so expensive over there, right? And I'm like, you really need a decent job over there just to live.
And financial intelligence, which you had mentioned you struggled with at the time.
Yeah, totally. And that was the thing I learned while I was traveling as well. And actually, while I was traveling, this is a big thing that happened. So while I was traveling, it's quite expensive to be drinking every night when you're living in a hostel. I just didn't have that money. And I was like, okay, what can I do? Like we were speaking about before, when you've got one thing, you need to do something different to stop you from doing that one thing. So in this case, it was drinking. And I was like, okay, I couldn't really read that well back then, but I remember when we were traveling, or when I was traveling, a lot of people would be talking about the books they had read. And I'd be like, man, I really love to read a book, you know? And I remember Anthony Kiedis from Red Hot Chili Peppers biography, Scar Tissue. Everyone was reading that at that point. They're like, man, this happened and this happened. I'm like, man, I want to read that book. And I could really not read that well back in those days. And I remember grabbing the book and going, okay, let's try and make this a game that when you get to a certain word that you don't know, instead of skipping that, you just keep trying to word it out until you get it. So I'd be reading very slow, but I loved the storyline. So I was really intrigued with what was going on in the book, and I'd get certain words, I'd keep going over, and then I'd get it, then I could move on. And before I knew it, I was right in the book. I was excited to read the book. And then I finished the book and I was like, holy shit.
Like, did anyone I read it.
Yeah.
I read the book.
Yeah. That's exactly what I did. That's exactly because I was sharing a room with actually 2 Canadian girls, right? And they were big readers. They were huge readers. And I'm like,
great influence.
Oh my God, guys, I've just finished this book. And they probably looked at me like, oh yeah, cool, man. I said, you just don't know. I have never finished a book from front to back and understand everything that's happened in the book. To me, it's always just been words. I've been like, what the fuck was that?
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That is really huge.
So Sorry, you go.
No, I was just going to say, so like what I'm hearing is like traveling gave you a deep sense of independence. It instilled a lot of independence and personal growth with finances, picking up a book and reading it for the first time and being exposed to what you were really capable of doing.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the that was probably the biggest thing. I don't know where I'd be if I didn't go and travel for all that time. And
Yeah.
that gave me that confidence, like, oh my God, I just finished that book. Maybe I could do some study now. Maybe I
Yeah.
could read some study and actually understand what I'm learning.
Did you
know what
ever
I mean?
think at the time that you would write a book?
No, never.
And yet
But
here you
people have,
are.
yeah, well, people have said to me, that like when I write stuff, they're like, man, you've actually got a really creative, you're a very creative storyteller, you know? So, but in saying that, I still don't get punctuation and all that. I
I
have
am
no
the
idea.
worst speller, worst grammar.
Yeah.
Like it's so infuriating.
I do not get that shit, eh?
Don't.
And like, yeah, totally. I do not get that stuff, but yeah, I've done that. And I probably will. I want to rewrite my book because when I wrote it, a lot of things have changed, but there's a lot of cool stuff in it. So I actually want to rewrite it and probably bring it out as an audio book as well.
So
But probably
cool.
more, yeah, probably more until we get to my companies, because I'm just so busy with my company at the moment. But
One day.
that's yeah, one day. But to tell you the truth, in a way, with my company, like I said, I thought I'd then have the confidence to go and maybe do some study then. This was sort of what then happened with my company, right? Because I went and did study, right?
Yeah.
Because like we're talking about neurodiversity in the workplace, what I've sort of found, especially say high school and that, people just didn't understand what neurodiversity was back in those days. The
Yeah.
thing is, going into tertiary education, and I don't know what is it called tertiary education in Canada? So that's like higher education. So once you finish high school, you'll go to college or university or a vocational education training or whatever it's called, right? And this is more based around workplace training and stuff like that, right? What I've found, especially working in that industry then, and especially going and doing some extra learning and that, because I can tell you right now, I've got that many qualifications now, they're hanging out of my ass.
Amazing.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And but what I found was that once again, we're at that same point. A lot of these universities and colleges have no understanding of how to best support neurodivergent people. They have no idea. So a lot of these neurodivergent people are now going back through this torment of what they experienced at school because there's no support or understanding. And a lot of these colleges and universities, they want to help, but they have no idea what to do.
The system, especially universities, are not set up for neurodivergence. Like it's the idea of sitting in a lecture so far back and listening and having to take notes quickly. Like for me, like I couldn't do that. Like my brain I would not be able to absorb any information. That's just not how my brain works. Like I remember my diagnosis allowed me to give special like two-sided paper. So like a teacher assigned someone in the class who took notes to take notes for me. So they would take their own notes and there'd be a sheet underneath that they could rip off and give to me afterwards because my brain could not process the information fast enough for me to be able to get it down on paper. Does that make sense? Like
totally.
Like there has to be adaptable things if neurodivergent people are going to feel.
There's technology now that can actually, you could put it there, it will record everything that the lecturer is saying and then put that into note form. But this is the thing, these universities, they don't know they don't know what tech's available. They don't have any idea. So this is a big thing that we're trying to do. We're actually building a platform. So like a website type of thing where neurodivergent people will be able to go there and we'll actually show you all the courses, all the schools, all that. So it might be like I know, a diploma of management, a diploma of leadership, a master's in something from this college or university, whatever. And then what we're going to do, we're going to endorse colleges or universities who actually have neurodiversity training and understanding, which we will provide them.
Wonderful.
Do you know what I mean? So say if you're looking for a place and you're like, man, I want to go to a place that understands my ADHD
and will support me.
Yeah, you could type in ADHD and type in what you're looking to study, and then it will come up with all the colleges that will actually say, okay, we understand this, we can do this, all of that.
That's
then
fantastic.
You can go, great, I'm going to sign up to that one because I know, because they will tell you that they support you. Mm-hmm. Any university will, but then you'll get there and they have no idea because they want your money. But we want to connect people with the right ones, right? Yeah. So you're able to make a better decision based on the support you're going to get, type of thing. And then if you sign up through our website, we're going to give all neurodivergent people, we're just going to give them free training on to help them to develop in their career and all that type of stuff, because
for free?
It should be for free. Yeah, for free.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah, we don't want to charge you.
Are you so sorry. I love that you're making it easily accessible for people who are struggling to access help and training that they desire. Are the schools that you're currently in connection with all in Australia at the moment?
Yes, but we are wanting to design it so it'll be international. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So let me know when you're here in Canada. You better send me a message. I'd be happy.
Yeah. So like the thing is, I'm pretty sure in Canada you've got a large population of international students.
Yeah.
We have it here in Australia as well. So from India, Asia, places like that, in those countries, they get no support at all. It's sort of taboo to talk about neurodiversity there. So there's big money in the international student market. So what we really want to look at is, instead of, because we're going to work off some referral type of fees type of thing, which works out to be like within like thousands of dollars. So instead of using that money to go, okay, let's put that in our pocket. I'll put some of it in my pocket because
you gotta live
bloody hard. Yeah, totally. But we want to use a lot of that to put back into the student to help them and give them a lot of training, which they'll never get in their countries as well. So this is a big thing we wanted to. Plus also too, we want to encourage. So say, I don't know what the universities are. We'll say University of Toronto. Is that what it's called? Okay, cool. So let's say the University of Toronto has become an endorsed by, we've gone, man, they tick all the boxes. We're going to endorse that university now. Then all these people are able to go, oh man, I want to go there because they support ADHD and OCD, for example. I'm going to go there. Then what we want to try to do, hopefully the other universities will go, man, the University of Toronto is getting all of these people. They look great because they're seen as like, they're endorsed by Neurodiversity Academy. Man, we should be doing that as well. Do you know what I mean? So we want to try and see if that will open up the doors to these other ones starting to go, fuck, man, we better get our shit together, because they're getting thousands of students from overseas as well. And we're missing out on this market. You know what I mean? So we really want to see if that will try and help people to change their mindset into how they actually run a university or college.
Well, as one neurodiverse person to you, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I wish I had, I got a lot of really great support. My parents were really good at getting me support. So that served me really well. But I think helping those who didn't have the kind of support that I did, I think it is so important. And so thank you for committing yourself to helping this community of people. Yeah, my last question for you, or second last question. What do you hope that people listening take away from your story today?
Look, I think a big thing is that regardless of what you've come against. I think that with hard work, it's not easy. You can achieve your goals. Like I said, I'm nowhere near where I need to be yet. I'm definitely a lot closer than what I was. You definitely can reach your goals if you work hard towards them. Plus, also too, I think a big thing is being yourself. Like you spoke about earlier when we were talking about finding your niche and all of that type of stuff, right? I think in that period there, right, you're getting told so much information from so many different people. And some of that advice sometimes isn't the correct or the right advice for you. So sometimes, and I used to wear suits, I'd have my head shaved, but I found that that's just not me. I'm this chilled out guy who likes wearing, jeans, skate shoes, a hoodie or a shirt in summer, tie my hair back. That's me. And until I found that in me, I was wearing suits and trying to be this person I wasn't. So when you can be yourself, that's when the magic really starts to happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm hearing like self-trust. And that like if something doesn't feel right for you, don't take that as evidence that something's wrong with you. Just take it as evidence as that thing isn't meant for you. But you are not broken. Like we're not broken as human beings. Society is very broken. We are humans. We're humans.
Totally.
Follow the soul. And so if anyone here has been listening and they want to connect with you, they want to learn from you, where should they go?
Yeah, look, there's probably a lot of things to check me out. Connect with me on LinkedIn. So Will Wheeler, you'll probably be able to find me there. And if you do, maybe write me a short, because I get so many people connecting with me, especially like salespeople and stuff like that. So I don't connect with people if I don't really know who they are. So if you send me like a personal invite, just say, hey, look, I listened to you on this podcast. Then I'll know why I need to connect with you then. You can also check out my company's website, so neurodiversityacademy.com, or you could go to our podcast, which is the openheartedsociety.com. It's actually called the Open Hearted Podcast, but that's a whole nother thing. We're actually trying to develop a dating and friendship app. So that's a whole nother thing I'm working on for neurodivergent people. Yeah. So that's a whole nother project. But if you go onto those websites, you'll be able to connect with all my social media platforms and work. Yeah, all of that type of stuff. So that's
amazing. And I'll just have those links all easily located in the episode description. So anyone listening, you don't have to guess or look around. You can just go to the episode descriptions, click away, and connect with Will immediately. Nice. Thank you so much for this conversation. You've given us so much information and a peek into your life with so much depth. Like you really allowed us to take this journey with you. And I'm really grateful for your vulnerability, because I know, at least for me, it's been really nice to connect with someone who gets it, if that makes sense, who gets it. And I know that there will be many other people who this will really resonate with. So thank you.
Well, not a problem. I think talking about stuff is key. Do you know what I mean? It can be hard and embarrassing, but that's where we can open up and change. No, so thank you for having me. And I really hope you'll come on to my podcast as well.
I would be absolutely honored, Will. Let's do that.
I love that. Let's lock that down. That's an agreement right
Everyone
there.
on this video virtual handshake.
yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and letting us know your thoughts in the comments below. It truly means the world to me to hear from you. New episodes will be available every Saturday, both on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you would like to learn more about my work as a coach, today's guest, or have a story that you would like to share on the Pivot Point, check out the episode description for more information. Now time for the legal stuff. This podcast is presented to you solely for educational and entertainment purposes. I may be a professionally certified coach myself, but hosting a podcast is not coaching. This podcast should not be used in substitution of working with a licensed therapist, doctor, coach, or other qualified professionals. Copy that? Amazing. See you on the next episode. Nothing but love, Jess.